spoil it. Do not spoil it.
Hey everybody, we are here today to do a mini book haul. We are in a different location. We are not in front of my usual leaning bookshelf. We are in front of the office bookshelf, although that top row is leaning, so it's almost the same aesthetic. I don't know about y'all, but I love watching book hauls while at the same time feeling a little bit simultaneously conflicted with the fact that in my normal life, I don't really advocate for consumption or overconsumption, but I was actually at a virtual craft talk with Paisley Rechtel this week, and she was talking about the idea of appropriation and globalization and how we weave that into crafting stories, and it was really interesting. But something that she mentioned is that an avid book reader on average purchases 16 books a year, and that's considered an avid reader. And she followed with the joke, well, that explains why we're not making any money. So I hope that you enjoyed this book haul, knowing that that's kind of the cognitive dissonance in which I'm filming, where I really want to support local bookstores and authors, and I love having books and talking about books, but at the same time, I really also don't want to advocate for overconsumption, especially if titles are available at our local libraries. But I am excited for the books that I do have. So the first two that I want to share with y'all, I'm really excited about because they are both books from people that I know. These next two books, one's a poetry collection, one is a debut novel, and they are from alumni of the UNCW, so the University of North Carolina, Wilmington MFA program, which is where I got my MFA as well. So the first book is by Alexa Duran. This is a poetry collection entitled DM Me Mother Darling. It just came out earlier this year.
I'm using my vaccination card as a bookmark.
Something that was true of working with Alexa in workshop was always her attention to sound and how heavily saturated in sonics her work is. And I think I've mentioned before, that's what I look for almost more than anything in poetry, is the musicality behind it. And her sounds are just so fantastic, the way that they're almost just like stepping stones. Like she'll use certain vowels and certain consonants as stepping stones to one another, and you feel yourself skipping across her lines. They're really beautiful. And the premise of the collection is also really interesting because the speaker is exploring what it means to be a mother in modern times, while also having a series of poems in the persona of Mother Darling after her children have, from her perspective, kind of been kidnapped to Never Neverland.
Or is it just Neverland? How many nevers to get to Neverland? Fourth star on the right or the left.
If you're into persona poems, if you're into retellings of fairy tales, if you appreciate really finely tuned sound in your poems, I recommend checking this collection out. I'm also really excited to read Girl in the Walls by Adam Gnussi. I love a good thriller, and Adam is just one of the sweetest guys, so it's so cool to be able to see the success that this this novel is getting. And this is definitely the next thing on my to be read list. It's getting a lot of exciting buzz, and if you've read it, let me know. I would love to know.
Don't spoil it. Do not spoil it.
But let me know what you think. So we're going to move on to some more poetry now. I got Arrow from Alice James Books. I assume Mita Chakraborty. I mentioned this earlier in my video about writing a book review for that. So if you're interested in seeing the process of how I write a book review about a collection of poems, I will leave that linked up
below. Up below. What is happening to me today? It's because Mercury's in retrograde. That's what I'm betting.
This collection is so formally varied in terms of odes and elegies and essays. It's so steeped in literary allusions as well. I mean, you can really tell that the poet is just so intelligent and thoughtful and intentional about the context in which she's crafting her work. And it's a really beautiful exploration of grief and how it really kind of dismantles this idea of grief and joy and forces the reader to work through with the speaker, how do you live with both at all times, especially after something traumatic has happened, like the passing of a loved one. Really beautiful collection. I would highly recommend it.
I guess this is kind of like a review and a haul, because I've read some of these books.
So next up are 3 chapbooks. The first one is Memoria by Michelle Lizette Flores, and she's one of my YouTube buddies here. So I will leave her channel linked down below. First of all, what a cool cover. Really love that. This book explores identity and femininity and maternal relationships, both as mother and daughter. It's tender, but it's also painful at the same time, and it doesn't shy away. It doesn't shy away from exploring any of the emotional complications of our closest relationships. I think it's a really powerful chapbook. The next one is Parrot Flower from my pressmate Kimberly Ann Priest over at Glass Poetry Press, and I really enjoyed this chapbook. It's told in a series of vignettes, or at least that's how I would describe it. I don't know if that's how the poet would describe it, but it feels like this collection of snippets and observations is woven together again to explore an interpersonal relationship of 2 people who are both assault survivors, and just the attention to detail and the way in which you get this expansive sense of the relationship and the struggles that each person is going through these subtle, small pieces of language and how those pieces compound upon themselves. It's very atmospheric. I thought it was really well done. Definitely something I want to revisit and reread again. Also from Glass Poetry, I got Stone Fruit by Gardner Dorton. And as somebody who also grew up in the South, I could relate a lot to certain themes that were woven throughout this collection. This idea of exploring your own identity in a culture that's steeped heavily in religious doctrine and how you navigate that and how you hurt and heal from that, I think is really interesting and was explored in very complex, sensitive ways in this collection. So if that sounds like something you're interested, I would recommend checking that out, as well as just pretty much all of the Glass books. So these next 2 books I got at a bookstore because things are starting to open back up. And the first is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And this book is just so beautiful. If y'all have seen it circulating, it is worth the hype. I highly recommend it. I think I'm going to finish it today. Kimmerer is both an ecologist who is studied in Western science, but she also talks about how we really need to rely on indigenous wisdoms and the reciprocal relationships that they advocated for and practiced in order to bring about restoration to the lands that we live on. And I mentioned this in my the Poet's Book Tag video. The language is just so stunning. It is so poetic. So if you are interested in ecology, if you just want to expand your nonfiction reading and you want something that's really lyrical, I highly recommend this book. It's been so beautiful so far. And I also picked up Chlorine Sky by Mahogany L. Brown. I was so excited to get this book because I'm always looking for new novels in verse for young adult readers.
Mine's currently on submission. And submission lasts forever.
So I was really excited to get this book, and the voice to me is such a strength. How clearly our protagonists and their personality is rendered on the page through verse, I think is truly remarkable. I was kind of going into the collection hoping that the plot might have been a little bit more structured, but in retrospect, I think that is just because I use the Save the Cat beat sheet when I write novels in verse. And so for me, it's helpful to try to identify those points, those plot points in the books that I read. But Kay Spivey had a really good video recently, and I'll leave that linked down below, about our current obsession with Save the Cat and how we don't want to A, just rely on Western models of storytelling, and B, we don't also want to oversaturate readers with stories that could eventually feel formulaic. So I've been thinking about that too, and making sure that I'm not bringing to books some of my own preconceived notions, even though I think that that's something that we all do. This was definitely well worth the read. Such an amazing voice in the protagonist. Definitely a very powerful coming of age story. And then the last books that I got are literary journals, which I'm going to include because sometimes I think literary journals don't get enough love, especially for how much hard work goes into putting them together. So the first one that I got, look at this big honkin' book. It's beautiful. This is the Art Saves Spring 2021 issue of Hunger Mountain. Hunger Mountain has long been one of my favorite literary journals since college.
Which at this point was like 10 years ago.
But one of my poems is in this book, so in this journal, so it was really exciting to be able to have a poem in here for the first time, and I will leave linked above where I read the poem that's published in here. I also got the latest issue of Plowshares. This is their spring 2021 issue as well. Going to be honest with you, friends, I haven't had the time to check it out yet, and I think that I must have gotten this from entering a writing contest from them, because I
know I don't have an active subscription to them.
So I'm pretty sure that I received this because of a contest entry, but I am excited to be able to check it out, especially short stories. I really love short stories in literary journals. I think you just find gems that you otherwise wouldn't have. And the last literary journal that I got was the Florida Review. This is volume 45, number 1. I'm excited about this one because I also have a poem in it, and I thought that it would be fun to read it to y'all. Normally I will read poems as their own video, but I thought, hey, why don't I just sneak it in as a little treat for anybody who makes it this far. So if you've made it this far, let me know down below. This poem is called Amplified Pain, and it's based on an NPR podcast I heard about amplified pain, how there's a condition which disproportionately affects teenage girls, and we don't know why yet, but in which all sensation is amplified. So a lot of physical interactions that we wouldn't perceive as being painful are actually very painful. And the research is kind of out on whether that's something that's actually physiological or psychosomatic, but regardless of the origins, it's something that needs to be addressed. And this is a poem that did not make it into my last chapbook, which for those of you who don't know is entitled Hypochondria, Least Powerful of the Greek Gods, and it came out last fall with Glass Poetry Press. So here's the poem. Amplified Pain. Girls faint like daisies fed drugstore dirt. They wilt at the edge of red-lit rooms filled with ellipticals and swimming pools. No one is allowed to help anyone else. Here is where they've come to heal. Pain receptors offset by even the slightest stimuli. Their lives torn off from the rest of the world. A litany of what hurts. The grass, icy blasts of air conditioning, concerned shoulder taps, and socks too coarse to cover skin. Sunlight, sunlight, sunlight. At the clinic, the girls are forced to feel discomfort, asked to redirect, to not respond. If you teach your body that falling face first into hot water is displeasure and not pain, who knows how well you will weather the next splinter, pair of scissors, the next scraped knee. One girl dreams her teeth are aquamarine, and with these stones she can savor the sweet pink of watermelon no longer too cold. How can sunlight be a symptom? When asked if it is hard to stand by and watch, the counselors say it's for the greater good. When asked again, they mime a headache of which they can't complain. Another girl dreams her forearms are canvases, clamped in circular frames. She can't stop cross-stitching bluebirds into her skin. She's learned to like the taste of vomit. At least sunlight is clean. At least sunlight cleanses. The science so far suggests the treatment is successful. In small ways, the girls claim back their former selves. 40% increase in tolerance. Threshold high enough to begin reintegration, its ribbon-coated risk. To focus on pain makes pain worse. This is proven. I try to keep this with me, though some things it cannot ease. So that was my poem, Amplified Pain, in the Florida Review. If I can't find the NPR article or podcast about it, I'll leave that linked down below. And if you're interested in hearing more poems about health anxiety and our relationships with our bodies, shameless plug, you guys. I'll leave the information below on how you can get a copy of Hypochondria, Least Powerful of the Greek Gods if you are interested. And let me know what books you've gotten recently and which titles you've enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of the titles that I mentioned. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I'll check in with you next time. Bye.